Hey guys! For today's project, we're tackling Arya's Cat's Paw Dagger from Game of Thrones. The dagger was first introduced as the weapon used by an assassin in an attempt to kill Bran, an event that, with a little help from Littlefinger, kickstarted the War of the Five Kings. The blade was later used by Arya to kill the Night King. At least in the show. Opinions about that resolution aside, the dagger is still perhaps the most pivotal weapon in the whole series. The blade is canonically forged of Valyrian steel, with a dragon's bone handle. Our blade will be made of beer can aluminum and PETG plastic. So pretty much the same thing. Both the steel blade and the gold frame of the handle are modeled as a single piece, with the black dragon bone modeled as separate inserts to be added later. The completed CAD model for the blade is then printed out in halves on the 3D printer. To create the mold, the first half of the blade is laid out in a wooden flask. A fine layer of green sand is then sifted over the blade to capture the details, and the flask is then packed with more green sand to form the bottom half of the mold. The flask is then flipped, and the second half of the blade is glued on top of the first. A layer of talcum powder is brushed over the surface to ensure that the two halves of the mold will separate cleanly. Finally, more green sand is packed over it to form the second half of the mold. Before we cast the blade, we need to remove the plastic version from the sand mold. Tapping the blade helps it separate cleanly from the sand. Air vents are drilled near all the sharp points of the mold to allow air to escape in the path of the molten metal. The metal will be melted in a charcoal burning foundry powered by a hairdryer. Ingots of aluminum recovered from beverage cans are added to the crucible after preheating in the fire. The cast blade is then refined and sharpened with an angle grinder. With the blade roughed out and the larger imperfections removed, it's time to sand. And sand. And sand. For the gold handle, we're tinting a clear varnish so the silver tone of the underlying aluminum can shine through. The Liquitex varnish we're using appears milky white when wet, but dries clear. For this mix, 2 ounces of varnish is mixed with 6 drops of yellow and 3 drops of red food coloring, though half that amount of varnish would have easily been enough for this project. 2 thin coats are then applied over the surface of the handle. Great care must be taken to prevent the varnish from pooling in crevices, or else the color will appear patchy. The end result came out redder than intended, somewhere between gold and copper. This method was an interesting experiment, but overall, I'll probably go back to spray paint or upgrade to airbrush to color aluminum in the future. The black dragon bone parts of the handle are printed out in PETG plastic on the 3D printer. They came out a little rough, so they'll need some aggressive sanding with a Dremel. To form the gems in the handle, we'll cast clear epoxy in a silicone mold. Because of the low detail required, we can use silicone caulking. The caulking is squeezed out of the tube and kneaded in soapy water to make it cure faster. Avoid silicone 2+, as it will take longer to cure. Once we have a good lump, Wait. Sorry, that's a blobfish. Alright, when we have a good lump, a 3D printed model of the gem is pressed into it. Keep your hands soapy to prevent the silicone from sticking to them. A dowel sticking out the top will form the inlet spout for the epoxy. Once the silicone is cured, the gem is extracted with an X-Acto and a pair of pliers. The gems are cast in a 2-part clear epoxy, tinted red with an alcohol-based dye. This casting method left many tiny bubbles on the top surface of the gem, so that's the side that will be glued into the handle, hiding all our sins from view. When the gems have all been cast and cured, it's time to join the handle parts to the blade. The pieces are glued together using clear JB weld, with a bit of sanding to hide the seam between the black plastic parts. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Or don't, I am not a beggar.